The gods must have smiled upon their venture, for the 3 young warriors made it past the encampment and into the cavern with little trouble. The fight had largely died down, and scores of the creatures were dead or wounded. Those who had not joined in had either retired to their tents or passed out from drink to sleep it off under the stars. The group headed into the main cavern, which was as wide as a cathedral. Boxes of rations and piles of rusty arms and armor were heaped together against the cavern walls. There was a semblance of order here and there, more than one might expect from mere orcs, but still, it was an ill-kept camp. If guards had been posted here, they were still missing. They pushed into the tunnel and were soon wending their way deep into the earth. As they approached the sleeping sentry that Nima had spotted, Tadalak tripped, sending a pebble skittering down the stone corridor. The rock struck the guard's leg and he groaned, stirring. Tadalak swore under his breath, but Nima was already bringing her crossbow to her shoulder. She sent a bolt whirring into the orc's neck. The creature tried to scream as the shaft pierced his throat, but he was choking on blood, and all that emerged was a horrible gurgling. The orc attempted to stand, his hands clutched about the bloody stick protruding from his windpipe, but then Bruckner was upon him. The swordsman drew his dirk and plunged it into the orc's chest. The sentry fell in a bloody heap. Tadalak brushed off his hands as though quite pleased with his role in all of this. "Well, that's one down. What should we do with the body?" Bruckner searched the corpse. The orc had little of interest. Tattered clothing, a rusted sword, and scraps of armor taken from various sets, pieced together like a patchwork quilt. However, he noticed on the guard's belt a small iron ring with 2 keys. They were quite old, with the sheen of rust, but were otherwise sturdy. Bruckner arranged the body of the guard such as to make it appear that the oaf had transfixed himself on his own spear. A likely enough occurrence, no doubt. Tadalak laughed at the sight and sat next to the orc, making a gruesome face in mimicry of the creature. He laughed again cheerfully, then hopped back to his feet. "Come on, we have to find that king." He paused for a second, then looked at Bruckner and Nima, asking nervously, "What are Ox and Little Sister going to do with the king if you find him? Or are you going to kill him?"
I don't much relish the thought of killing a king, whatever his condition. Best not to think of it now.
Bruckner took the keys as he spoke, slipping them into his pack. Fortunately, the commotion of the brief battle didn't seem to have attracted any immediate attention, so the 3 continued warily on. The piled boxes of provisions began to thin out as they descended deeper into the underground world beneath Mount Elisbor, and soon there were little more than littered heaps of broken armor and cracked glass lining the walls. The trio came to what seemed to be the last white witching fire. The tunnel ahead continued downward into darkness. Just past the white ensorcelled fire, on the right side of the tunnel branched another path. A thick iron grate with a locked door blocked access. "Now what?" murmured Tadalak.
"Quiet,"
Nima said, holding out a hand for silence.
"I need to listen."
Nima approached the iron door slowly, scanning the walls and ground for traps, her ears straining for any clues as to what may lie beyond the iron bars. She reached the grating and peered through into the near pitch black beyond. As her eyes grew slowly accustomed to the gloom, she could make out a huge humanoid shape, and she began to hear the slow and steady rumble of deep breathing. As she watched and listened, the sounds and sights coalesced into something recognizable. A dozen feet past the iron door lay a monstrously large troll, chained up with giant manacles connected to steel rings set in the cave walls. Though she could only see the one, from the sound of the breathing, she was certain there were many such monsters. She turned back to Bruckner and Tadalak and whispered,
"Trolls. More than one by the sound of them."
She caught Bruckner's eye, whispered,
"What should we do?"
If we don't kill these trolls now, they may well be set on us or on Savar later, and it will be much harder to kill them unchained. If we do kill them now, someone will notice them, and we increase the risk of being caught before we find the king.
Is there any chance these trolls might be guarding something? After all, if the Orc Watch stops here, perhaps it's because the trolls are picking up the guard?
If we could manage to kill them or free them, we'd have a clear path to whatever they may be guarding.
So, one of us sneaks in, tries the keys or picks the lock on their chains, and at the right moment, Tadalak does some magic to attract their attention into the orc camp.
We could use the body of the orc as further bait. The question is whether you, for it would have to be you, can manage to make it in undetected and remain undetected throughout.
Nima shrugged.
I think I can manage it. At least, I'm willing to try.
Tadalak, do you think this can be done? Do you have a spell which could lead these monsters to the cave mouth?
Tadalak stroked his tiny chin with a sagely air, apparently pleased that Bruckner had asked his advice.
This is a dangerous plan, but if we can do it, what fun! And also, then these trolls maybe will fight those orcs outside, and General Alexander will be impressed with us all. But,
his brow furrowed,
I don't want little sister to get hurt. I guess if she's careful. As for Tadalak's part, why, that's easy as pie. There's one thing all trolls hate: fire. So all we have to do is take some of this junk,
he gestured back towards the crates and burlap sacks,
and stretch it across the hallway on the far side of the gate. The trolls should flee from the fire, meaning they will head for the surface. And there's only one path from here to there. They'll run out the entrance and meet 300 drunk orcs. That should liven up their party.
He grinned.
Fine. The first thing we do is set up the firewall and make it ready to light quickly. Tadalak and I will stand on the safe side of that wall. Nima unlocks the gate, sneaks in, unchains as many of the trolls as she can, and sneaks out. Once she's on our side of the wall, one of us, it can be me, must lure the trolls out into the main cavern. I then rush back to the safe side of the wall, which we will set alight. The trolls should flee towards the entrance of the cavern, and the rest should take care of itself. If Nima is noticed by the trolls, she can run out to us, get onto the safe side of the wall, and we can then light the wall in haste. Before we do this, can we scout a little bit into the other end of the cavern? I don't want to be on one side of the firewall, safe from the trolls, only to find something worse on my side with no avenue of escape.
I think that's a good idea, but how do you recommend we go about it without calling attention to ourselves? I can see in dark places, but I need a bit of light at least. If we could light a torch, I should be able to see well enough to make my way.
And here I thought elves could see in the dark. Very well. It's a risk, but there's nothing for it. Scout ahead cautiously. Tadalak and I will prepare here.
Tadalak murmured something, and a spark flew from his lips to settle onto the pitch-soaked end of a torch he carried. It blazed into life, and the room ahead of her was made visible, while Bruckner began moving crates and sacks and whatever else was likely to burn well, stacking it as quietly as he might in a line stretching across the width of the tunnel. Tadalak pitched in, and after 10 minutes of steady effort, the two of them had built a short, flammable wall. They left a small gap on the right side for Nima to leap through after tempting the trolls out. As they worked, Tadalak found a large skin full of some very strong liquor. Holding his nose, he emptied the foul spirits along the length of the makeshift wall. Nima, meanwhile, had ventured in another quarter mile or so. As she crept stealthily forward, she spotted a small patch of white standing out against the dark stone. She bent over and picked it up. It was a handkerchief of pale blue silk, ornately embroidered with the letters H.J. in purple thread. It had been very fine, but was now filthy and torn. She returned to her companions and handed the handkerchief to Bruckner, who studied it.
H.J. Hector Janison. It seems we're on the right track, and I want to press further. But we should follow our original plan. It will do us no good to find the king and then face an army of orcs supported by trolls. Are you ready, Nima?
He handed her the keyring.
Nearly,
she said, and proceeded to prepare by setting crossbow, quiver, and quarterstaff down near the wall where she could easily reach them. She made certain that her dagger was near to hand and easily accessible in her boot, then secured the keys and her lockpicks in a handkerchief tied about her wrist. She tied her hair back tightly from her face, then nodded brusquely to her companions and took a deep breath.
Okay, let's give this first lock a go.
She fit the first key into the lock holding the grated door closed. It opened with a metallic click.
Wait for 2 minutes to light it, or until something goes wrong.
Nima swung the door open slowly. The old hinges creaked slightly and she froze, but no troll bellowing rose up in protest, so she slipped past the door. The steady, deep breathing of the trolls grew louder as Nima probed into the room. She could see clearly now, making out the shadowy shapes of 4 large trolls, all chained with thick manacles to the walls of the cavern. The chains ran through huge cuffs on the beast's wrists, conjoining at an iron collar strapped about their necks. Giant padlocks held the chains tightly at the collar, the locks resting against the chests of the monsters. The trolls were half-sitting, slumped against the rough walls, fast asleep. With only slightly trembling hands, Nima drew forth the keyring. She tiptoed to the nearest troll, a massive creature covered with giant bumps like toadstools growing out of moist skin. While still feet away, she smelled the fetid stench of its flesh, like decomposing logs and rotting corpses. She eased the key into the first lock and turned it ever so slowly. The mechanism was heavy and it took time to fully rotate, but the lock finally popped open with a click. Nima gasped as the troll shifted in his seat and exhaled forcefully, blasting her face with a wall of hot, stinking air.